Have you ever thought about being a paratrooper and not only just being a paratrooper in the Army, but being a chaplain's assistant too? So what do you think? What visions come to your head? Mine comes out, I'm drawing my knees into my chest and I'm praying to God all the way down. It set the course for my guest as he has journeyed on and he has developed this program helping first responders and fellow veterans to overcome. So today, learn more about my guest, Rick Blaine of Heroes Hearthstone. And we will learn all about this wonderful nonprofit that he has in Pennsylvania. But before we jump into the interview, let's hear a word from Living Legacy with Weezy. And what is that one story you want your children to remember or your grandchildren? Is it the tale of how you've overcome a challenge? Is it the day that you met the love of your life? Or perhaps when you held your first grandchild? Your story is a treasure. It's a part of who you are and a gift to the generations to come. Imagine your grandchildren hearing it in your voice, feeling those emotions, seeing your face, hearing your voice, passing it on, and then they are able to pass this on to their children. I'm Weezy, and I'm your storytelling guide. I can help you capture your life stories in a way that is unique and personal to you. Let's preserve it together for the ones that you love. What is it that you are doing with veterans these days?
Oh goodness. So I run a local nonprofit in Northeast Pennsylvania called Heroes Hearthstone. We work with combat veterans and first responders. We offer a range of resources and programmings with our local fire departments and police stations, along with we gained a partner about a year and a half ago with a local drug and alcohol treatment facility that runs or has a veteran specific program. So we offer our resources and programs there also.
All right, very cool. Let's dive into get a little background on you. What was it like growing up in Harvey's Lake, Pennsylvania, and how did your upbringing shape you to with the decision to join the military?
Good question. So I grew up in Harvey's Lake, Pennsylvania, small town USA at the end of a dirt road. I had, I think, a stereotypical 1980s childhood. I think what helped me to make the transition, or not transition, the decision to go into the military. I think the first time I ever put on a uniform, I was about 4 years old. My dad was in the military. I've got so many aunts and uncles, grandparents, grandfathers. The last time we really tried, I think I am fifth generation
Oh,
uh,
wow.
veteran. So I was born into it, you could say.
You were born with the camo on.
Yes, yes.
I've done a little background checkup on you,
Hmm.
and you were an assistant chaplain in the military.
Yep.
What was that like?
I loved it. I was a chaplain assistant mainly in the 82nd Airborne Division. I think today they're called a religious support specialist.
So you were praying with them as they jumped out of the planes.
Oh no, I was the one doing the praying.
So no
Yeah,
jumping for you?
what's that?
No jumping for you?
Oh no, I have 47 jumps, but I guarantee I was praying on every one of them for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. So what so you were like their God support out there in their
But
jumps.
we provided support for the men and women in our unit. For me, it was a really unique experience because I was in the service, but I was also serving those who served. Fast forward 20 years, and I'm still doing the same thing, just in a different occupation.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
So what is your role in providing military honors for fallen soldiers? That must be really impactful.
Oh, it definitely was. It turns out both when I was in the 82nd and I also served Fort Monmouth, New Jersey for a few years. I fit the bill for an honor guard. I was above 6 foot tall. It was funny when I left Fort Bragg and I got to Fort Monmouth and I first walked into my company first sergeant's office. He looked at me and said, "How tall are you?" And at the time, I was 6 foot 2. I'm down to 6 foot now. That's a little side effect of falling out of airplanes. Um, but I said 6'2". He goes, "Perfect. You're running the honor guard team." So as soon as I got there, I was instantly put on, and I ran the honor guard team there for about 18 months. It's a sobering experience, but it's one that I felt very honored to do. We took care of both men and women that were killed in action, either in Afghanistan or Iraq, but we also perform military honors for retirees, people that have been out of the military for a number of years. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
it's part of my military experience that I really cherish.
So, how many years did you serve in the military?
At 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Yep.
So, after the 6 years, you transition back into civilian life. And here in my notes, I see that you transitioned. I'm just going to read my notes. You transitioned to pursue a career at the Pennsylvania Correctional Facility as an officer. What was what was that like?
It was educational. I first got out of the military. I actually went to seminary. I did that for a few years while I worked, and then I transitioned into the Academy for the Department of Corrections for Pennsylvania. I was also an associate pastor at a church for a number of years, almost a decade. But yeah, I was a corrections officer for the state of Pennsylvania up until 2020. Unfortunately, I got hurt at work at the prison. After the third reconstructive surgery, the state said, "Enjoy your retirement." So
Oh,
I got
okay.
medically retired after 15 years and then started Heroes Hearthstone.
It
Yeah,
sounds like you really did a lot while you were a corrections officer, but you were also part of the fire emergency response team while you were there and the honor guard. Is there a special moment that stands out to you that you'd like to share with us?
there's a lot. I think one regret that I have, if I can say, yeah, one regret that I have from my correctional experience, I should have kept a journal. That's something that I should have
Mm.
started right out of the gate and not something to write in every day, but the absolute outlandish stories that no one would ever believe. I should write those
See,
down.
you should because here I am. I run Living Legacies. That's a thing that I'm like, write it down.
Uh-huh. Yep. But yeah, while I was a corrections officer, I also trained with the state to be on the fire emergency response team. So I was a fireman inside the prison along with being a corrections officer. Just like the military, I being part of the honor guard team, it was a profound experience for me. So to carry that tradition on into the Department of Corrections, it was just a natural transition. Fortunately, we were utilized a whole lot less during as a corrections officer than in the military. But still, there was a decent handful of occasions where we would go out in support of. I know there was a Scranton police officer that was killed in the line of duty. Goodness, that had to have been close to a decade ago. We've lost other corrections officers in the line of duty right here at the Luzerne County Correctional Facility. And to go out in support of those services or those ceremonies, it's just a profound experience. And for me personally, it was always just a reminder that there is and there can be a consequence of doing this type of work or doing these jobs. It's a good reminder.
It is. And is it I've always heard that it's usually being served or domestic disputes or whatever that is like the highest cause of fallen officers. And is that what you worked with? Was it with the fallen police or people in the, maybe I'm not understanding correctly, or the people who were with the prison system that you honor guard for?
Oh, I was an honor guard within the prison. I worked at a place that's now closed called SCI Retreat, State Correctional Institute at Retreat. It's a medium security state prison, but obviously being in law, a part of law enforcement when a police officer dies or a corrections officer dies. state, federal, doesn't matter. If they're in our area, we go and support.
Okay.
And it's really something unfortunate that you participate in, but it's also awe-inspiring to be a part of when you have multiple departments showing up from all over the state. And you've got, I think the one that we did in Scranton, there was well over 1,000 people that showed up for that service. It's really something to see.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've seen it a
Yeah.
little too much here in the Charlotte area. So, with being a chaplain, being working in the correctional facilities and working with these honor guards and stuff in your own service, PTSD has to make an appearance. And how do you handle that?
It did, and I didn't do a good job of that. I think for most of my young adult life, especially after the military, I did struggle with signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress. I think I was actually diagnosed with it officially around 2012. Knowing what I know now, retrospectively, looking back, my finances were okay for the most part. My relationships were good. I struggled with some of the things that I experienced in my past. But because all of my other needs were being met, it was okay. Things weren't crazy, things weren't terribly hard. I think up until 2014, 2015, I did the normal approaches that most veterans do that seek help, is you call the VA and you talk to a therapist and you get put on a medication. And that helped with what my needs were at the time to the point where they were manageable. I was okay without going into great detail. Fast forward to 2015, and all of those things that are pillars and things that we rely on for our emotional support and safety, everything crumbled. Found myself like almost 80% of other veterans or those in corrections, or if you do military and corrections and fire, your statistics go up on whether or not you may or may not get divorced. I joined that club. I was going through that process and custody stuff and foreclosure stuff, and
Mm,
just all of the sudden, all of my stability was gone. So it really amplified the symptoms that were muddled in the past because now that's all I had.
yeah.
Um,
So, how you've already tried the traditional,
yep.
uh, after this has gone on, where did you go to seek more help?
Yeah. So great question. I didn't learn my lesson, and I dove right back into traditional. And I'm really not knocking it. The
It
medication,
just wasn't for you.
the talk therapy, yeah, it's really beneficial for a lot of people, and it helped me marginally, but it certainly didn't bring out any type of healing, or that it wasn't the cure. It's not what fixed it for me. I did, along with that, after I did that for a while and I got back on medication, I tried EMDR therapy. I tried exposure therapy. I have a list somewhere of all of the different things that
Mm-hmm.
I tried to just get myself well. Again, a lot of those things, marginal improvement. A lot of them helped a little bit, but I still struggled. I still had anxiety at my absolute worst towards the end of 2015, early 2016. I was seeing a therapist every other week. I was on 7 different anti-anxiety, anti-depression meds, along with prescription sleep aids. I was struggling. I did the anxiety and the depression were muted a little bit because of the medication, but we were treating all of the symptoms of the problem and not the problem. Fast forward a few years, and after I got into it, I did the talk therapy and I did the medication and I tried the EMDR and I tried the exposure therapy and started getting into the brain mapping and really trying to figure this out. Through a friend of mine, I came across an organization in Bluemont, Virginia called the Boulder Crest Foundation. I think they came around 2013. They offered a different approach than anything else that I had come across or tried. They have a program, they still have it. They have a handful of others now. They have some specific focuses on first responders as well as combat veterans, but they have the Warrior Path program, They still have it. It's PATH, PATH, Progressive and Alternative Training for Healing Heroes. It essentially it focuses on the concept of post-traumatic growth, but this isn't therapy. It's not counseling. There's no campfire and kumbaya. It's you're going to get out of this experience what you are willing to invest in this experience and in yourself. So it really just gave me ownership of my own recovery. I wasn't relying on a medication. I wasn't relying on or being dependent on somebody that I'm seeing every other week. It's on me. It's my responsibility. I went through a week long intensive program down in Virginia. At the time, I think it was an 18-month follow up where I think it's a 90-day follow up now, but you get to hang out with your cohort, the other men and women that you go through the program with digitally, of course, like you and I are
Mm-hmm.
doing today. You get a little bit of homework, there's suggested books to read, but being part of that community again, that I think all of us, whether you're struggling with post traumatic stress, anxiety, or depression or not, I think all of us that serve to a certain degree, we miss that camaraderie being amongst other people that serve or who have served. To do that along with developing and pursuing a growth mindset, that for me was a game changer because I know I now have a team of other guys that I'm accountable to for my own recovery. And in exchange, I'm also going to be accountable for them, or they can be accountable to me.
Mm-hmm. I
Uh,
gotcha.
really beneficial, and to begin to understand and value why educating myself on post traumatic stress was important. I didn't have any of those books 5 years ago. It's just something that in order to address the problem, you've got to understand the problem.
Yeah.
We're doing our best to understand the problem.
So, what were some of the self regulation practices and wellness techniques that have helped you the most?
Oh, goodness. That's a big part of our approach with Heroes Hearthstone when we're working with our veterans and first responders is providing the resources for and actually teaching, training self-regulation. If we don't self-regulate, we will self-medicate 100% of the time. So it's absolutely integral to develop self-regulation practices to grow. It's not the only thing that we need to do, but a big part of our healing and our growth is being able to go back into the things that we've experienced in life, those traumas, those things that we still, so many of us, a decade, 20 years, we work with Vietnam veterans. It's been a lifetime and they're still struggling
Yeah.
with the traumas from way back when. Uh, Self regulation gives us that ability, allows us to be able to have that pause that we can go back. And I'm going down a rabbit hole here explaining self regulation for us first, but allowing us to go back, we can't heal what we can't feel. And we're really good at throwing those things, those traumatic experiences, things that we go through into that proverbial rucksack and forget about them. And we'll deal with them someday until that someday comes because all of that stuff got too heavy. Learning self regulation, not just learning it, but learning how to implement it in our daily routine has been a game changer for me because it gives me that pause, that presence, that really the patience with myself to just slow down, calm down, be able to go back into this and deal with it so I can let it go. If you would have told me a decade ago or even 5 years ago that I would be a breathwork coach or a yoga instructor or meditation instructor, we get to teach veterans every single week about meditation and the benefits of meditation with post traumatic stress.
I want to segue into Heroes Hearthstone. How did you take what you're talking about now and start this nonprofit?
Jeffrey Holland had a quote: I may not be my brother's keeper, but I am my brother's brother. And because I have been given much, I too must give. I think there was a realization. There was a friend of mine. We actually started Heroes Hearthstone together, realizing the impact of what we had learned and the value of breathing every day, setting aside time intentionally to take deep breaths or to meditate. Uh, Realizing not just the benefit that we were able to gain in our life, but you start looking at your family members. Post traumatic stress does not affect just the fireman or the police officer or the veteran.
No,
If you're struggling with anxiety and depression, even though well intended, I guarantee you are bleeding on people that did not cut you.
that's what I call it, cut and bleed.
Absolutely. Seeing this unfold in our own lives and in my life, and my relationships are beginning to get better, and my outlook is beginning to get better, and I feel better about myself. I'm physically getting better. And also, having gone through that process and all of the things that I had tried prior to, which again, some of them helped a little bit in looking for all of these resources when I was trying to get well myself, quickly became apparent that this is something that we knew we needed for ourselves. So we need to create this in our community. So this resource is here for our local combat veterans and our local first responders. We live in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, and this, I believe it still is. I know it was at least a few years ago. We have the highest population per capita of veterans in the state of Pennsylvania in our little area.
Oh,
So
wow.
this is it's a much needed resource. And again, once I really began seeing the benefit of doing all of these things in my own life, we had to, I felt like it wasn't a choice. This was something that we had to do.
How does
Mhm.
your personal journey of post traumatic growth influence the way you connect with and help other veterans?
So to bumper sticker post traumatic growth, it's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Post traumatic growth is just the process that happens after a traumatic experience to healing. That's just post traumatic growth. How that's changed the way I connect with veterans. Prior to doing this, it was, I could relate to the struggle. You go up to the VA and you sit down in some of these waiting rooms, and there's empathy amongst everybody there, even without conversation, because we all know what the experience is. We all know what recovery of that experience is. I got really used to and very comfortable, as a lot of us do, just being comfortable being a victim. I
Yeah.
went through this bad experience, and now my identity is associated with this thing. And now I'm a disgruntled veteran, and I'm always going to be one. That's just me now. Post traumatic growth says, because you went through this thing, you now have the ability to have a leg up on everybody else who has not had that traumatic experience. Once you're able to glean from this thing and gain wisdom and ultimately let it go, you gain something that other people that haven't had or haven't experienced, you get to have. It takes work, but in connecting with other veterans, one of the things that I get to do, I absolutely love it. I have fallen in love with doing it. The Clearbrook Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, they're the organization. They have a veteran specific drug and alcohol rehab program that we get to go, and it's just a group therapy session where we just get to sit down with a whole bunch of veterans. I think the thing that I have found most beneficial in talking with veterans, because it's a challenge. We have other programs and other events that we do, like Campfire and Coffee. We had that last night. It is as it sounds. It's a campfire, and we have coffee. And it's just a group of veterans and first responders that understand the struggles that we all go through. And it's pretty fantastic just to be a part of those conversations where there's no judgment on, you're struggling, so you're weak. That's
Mm.
something that we convince ourselves. I'm going to go down another rabbit trail. I'm not going to do it. But Campfire and Coffee it's one of my favorite things that we get to do. But I think my favorite thing that we get to do is the treatment classes at Clearbrook, because for me, I get to sit down with these guys and gals once, maybe twice if I'm lucky. It's an inpatient program. They are there anywhere between 20 to 45 days. on average, depending on what level of treatment they're going after. Quickly realized if I'm going to be successful in these classes, I've got to be able to convey a message one time in 1 hour that's not going to fix them, but it's at least going to give them a trajectory, something to aim for. So, what can I do? What can I say? And it instantly put way too much pressure on myself. But how can I create a class or a talk, a discussion
Mm-hmm.
with veterans in 1 hour that's going to actually cause change? I'm counting on the fact that I'm only going to see them once. The thing that I have found that's been the biggest benefit, which I can attribute to post traumatic growth, is understanding I'm not a victim and being able to relay from my own personal experience and what I've been able to do and see and recover from. And now I have, because of all of those things that I went through, to be able to be at a point where I can look back at my combat experience and I can look at all of the unbelievable experiences that if you're not a corrections officer, you would not believe in the aftermath of a divorce and almost bankruptcy and all of these things, to be able to look back with post traumatic growth and see how all of these things played into my benefit and helped me gain things I never would have gained otherwise. That's what helps me to relate and speak with and connect with other veterans. Like it or not, and it's something we've got to be accountable with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We all do it. We get stuck sometimes in this is my struggle, this is my identity, this is where I am. I am an anxious person. I'm always going to be depressed. Woe is me, blah, blah, blah. It's really easy to get stuck there.
Yeah,
But when you
it
can
sure
talk
is.
with someone and meet somebody that, oh, I went through that too. I've got that relatable experience also. I also saw combat. How is this guy doing so much better than me? And it's not a comparison thing. Comparison is the thief of joy. Believe that with my whole heart. But when you have an example, when you've got somebody, not that you can look up to, but just look to realize this is possible. I can do this thing. I can bring myself out of the valley of the shadow of death. Uh, it's a privilege to be able to see this every day, every week, time and time again.
What are some of the other things that you do with Heroes Hearthstone?
Great question. So the post-traumatic growth and the developing a mindset for growth, that's our focus. That's our bread and butter. That's our niche. That's what we do the most of. Quickly realizing when we first started doing this, had no idea what we were doing, what we were getting ourselves into.
Don't
We
we
had
all start out that way?
absolutely, absolutely a quote that quickly became a favorite from Rumi. As you start to walk on the way appears. So knowing you don't have to have everything figured out first, the best thing that or the most important thing that you can do is just start. You'll
Yes.
figure it out on the way. That was our approach in the beginning. Understanding that post traumatic growth is hugely important. Learning to take care of ourselves, hugely important. Something that's really difficult to, or rather, an environment to be in and grow at the same time is food insecurity. Because we have so many veterans in our area, because we have a lot of volunteer EMS workers, firemen in our area. We have a very large service community in and around us. Food insecurity it's a real thing. It's difficult to get well mentally when you're starving physically. We partnered, we initially started with just doing food drives, collecting cans and non-perishables from people's cabinets. That quickly escalated. In 3 years, actually 3.5 years now, we have been able to facilitate around 270,000 pounds of food
Wow.
into our local community with EMS, fire, police. We have a local veteran homeless shelter transitional housing facility. We provide them with food every week. That's been an amazing resource to not only provide, but just to cultivate. And that only got built because our local communities saw the need also and saw us doing about. So we, none of this accomplishment is on us. It's from all of the support that we receive. Uh, we average right now about a ton per week of food.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That is wonderful.
it's fantastic.
In some of the pictures that you sent me, it looks like you go and you promote your word in different events and you have a huge, it looks like quite the smoker. What do you do with that?
Yep. So that's Wilbur. Wilbur is an 1800 or 18-foot long, started out his life as a 15, I think 1500-gallon propane tank that now sits on a car trailer and looks like an 18-foot long pig. He just goes to a lot of our community events, fundraisers, things that we have. He can smoke about 1,000 pounds of pork at a time. Yep,
Just a little bit.
just a little bit. But yeah, we are always our local uh, high schools, VFWs, American Legions, whenever they have events that are military or first responder specific, we're there. We've got our tables set up and handing out swag. Yeah, we also, I think some of the pictures that I sent you, we have, because of how we do what we do, we can be mobile. So we partner with a lot of local other veteran service organizations or local businesses. Back Mountain Makery in Dallas, Pennsylvania, we hold wellness workshops in their store. We actually get to have people come in and we do a kintsugi wellness workshop. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery, but we do it with a lacquer and precious metals. It's glitter, but it looks like precious metals. We're just
Mm-hmm.
teaching a class repairing broken pottery. So the idea is when you have something that's broken, when you put in the time and you put in the effort and you invest in this thing and you invest in ourselves, we have a tendency of being more beautiful
Oh,
after being repaired from being broken. Yeah, Kintsugi, we have a an annual ruck march that we do every day. That's been getting bigger and bigger every year.
I like, but talking about the Ruck March, and you said something earlier about carrying that image of a rucksack on your back and
Mm-hmm.
carrying all of your load, for a lack of a better word, of your emotional baggage.
Yep.
Just, I've done this before in groups too when we were talking about different things. And it's just such a strong visual of when you allow life to get you so weighed down. And I've done it with taking a backpack and actually taking bricks
Yeah.
and having somebody put the bricks. I'm going, how much we can keep putting these bricks in, but how much can you really carry before you fall down? And it sounds like that's what you're really working with your community, is to unload those
Yep.
bricks.
We actually, as part of that event, we encourage people to bring their own backpack or their rucksack if they have it. And you can walk it, you can run it, you can, however it is that you want to do it, you can do it. But we have a pile of rocks that we like, decent sized river rocks that we put on the start finish line with paint markers. And we encourage people to grab a rock and whatever that thing is that you're struggling with, that you're having difficulty just letting go, write it on that rock, put it in your bag, and you're going to carry that with you throughout your entire ruck. But if you're going to put it in your bag at the beginning, you have to do it with the intention, knowing at the end, you're letting it go. And that's been, I've actually kept all of those rocks that people have let go. And we
Oh,
put those on the finish line every year also. It's just a reminder, you know, we carry so much. We're not meant to, we're not supposed to.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that event. We're actually looking at, and we've got to start planning for that here soon. retooling that a little bit this year, making it a bigger community event. But it's a dual purposed event. That's a huge aspect of it. Just there is actual science behind it, pairing a physical act with a mental decision. When we do things, we're making that decision. Another modality that we use is a labyrinth, just that big circular thing that looks like a maze, but there's only one way to the center and there's only one way back out. We have veterans and first responders carry a rock also, and that's uh, emblematic of the things that we carry that we're not supposed to. And we'll carry those to the center of the labyrinth, let those things go, and then come back out, leaving them in the middle. When we pair a mental decision with a physical act, it has a tendency of sticking better. So when we do the ruck march and things like that, we're walking people through. It's a living metaphor, so to speak. We're giving you a rock. This is your burden. You have to let it go. That's the goal. But it's also training. And because we work with veterans and we work with first responders, if there is a word that is, I can't think of the word that I'm trying to think of, training, but if there is a word that relates to, it doesn't matter the branch, the MOS, the occupation, the type of first responder.
Transformate. What transformation work
We
or
all understand the
transference?
word training.
Yeah.
We understand that the value of training is what keeps us alive. And there's a saying in the military. It carries over to the first responder side of things. Also, is the more you sweat in times of peace, the less you bleed in times of war. The more we train and prepare, the more likelihood we are to succeed
Yeah. Yeah.
and come back home.
I know that you are located in Pennsylvania, but my podcast goes all over the airways.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wanted to send a donation, would you accept donations? And you have a really special message. Do you do public speaking to other groups across the nation?
I would not say across the nation, definitely in my local area. Yes, that's something that we do a lot of. There are some larger companies that we not necessarily work with, but they have veteran readiness groups and clubs or organizations within their company that are comprised of veterans and first responders. And we'll go and do talks and discussions, speeches with them.
So where would they find your information, Rick?
So you look us up stone.com. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram.
Very cool. As your as the listeners are non-veteran or we may not be so exposed to the military life, what is something that we can do as the civilians we need to do or to better understand in the way we react to a veteran?
A, a quote comes to mind. Carl Jung, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. For me personally, some of the greatest growth that I was able to find and achieve was simply just by giving it back, just taking the things that I had learned and I had grown in
Mm-hmm.
and gave it away. I think we have a tendency of overcomplicating things. It's been, I say that to say this, it's been pretty amazing over the last, since 9/11, the amount of veteran service organizations that have popped up, and that's veteran organizations run by veterans for veterans or first responders. Uh, the amount that has popped up since 9/11 has been absolutely crazy. Not bad mouthing the VA. They're not the only ones, but the main approach that we've taken to veteran health and wellness, veteran mental health and wellness, primarily has been here, take this medication. We as veterans understand that's not the end all be all. That can't be the only approach that we take since 9/11. Just that there has been just this surge of organizations run by veterans for veterans because we see the need. There is such a need. And it has to, I feel, the primary building block that most of these organizations have is the peer-to-peer support aspect of their programming. So how can you help? Because there has been such growth in the veteran service community outside of what was before, no matter where you go, do a Google search and veteran service organization near me. And I guarantee you, you'll get a list of organizations within a driving distance. Around us, there's probably a half a dozen veteran service organizations, not even including the American Legions or the VFWs, uh, at least a half a dozen within a half an hour. So there's so many places
Wow.
for us that align with a lot of us right down the road from us, Patriots Cove. They do hunting and fishing as a primary resource for veterans and first responders, getting them outside and reconnecting with nature. There's organizations that do the talk therapy. There's organizations that help veterans get jobs or get education. So whatever it is that you're passionate about, I bet that there's an organization somewhere around you that aligns with your heart that serves veterans and first responders. So there's so many different ways that we can give back.
Yeah. Just the other day, or well, this in January when we experienced our big cold snap, there was a
Mhm.
news story about there's a group here locally that they cut firewood and then they
Yep,
deliver the firewood to the veterans and first responders
that's great.
so that they
We
can keep their house warm.
yeah, we have a gentleman, an older gentleman around here, Greg, retired military. He was also a corrections officer. He goes around during the winter with pipe insulation and rolled fiberglass and homes of the elderly, insulates their basements or their crawl spaces or whatever to help save on heating bills.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
there's so many ways that we can give back.
I like how you say that because yes, we can help you, but I like the encouragement that you get to Google it
Yeah,
and see where you can help in your own
yep,
backyard.
that's it. We are not the end all be all. I feel that our approach, statistically speaking, scientifically speaking, it is one of the best approaches in the psych field now for recovering from post traumatic stress. But we play a part.
Mm-hmm.
We get to work with Patriots Cove. We get to work with Camp Freedom. We get to work with all of these other organizations and plug in what we offer with what they offer, along with all of our local first responders.
Rick, this is such an amazing uh, organization that you have founded. I know you co founded it, but now you are the sole owner of this nonprofit along with your volunteers. It is just wonderful how you take and help the veterans and the first responders go from, hey, I have these issues, but giving them the tools in which to come out the other side of it is just wonderful. And I've really enjoyed learning about Heroes Hearthstone. Just thank you for the service that you provide there in Pennsylvania to the veterans and the first responders. It was a
Well,
pleasure to see you.
thank you very much. Appreciate your time today and the invite, and it was great talking with you.
Great talking to you too. Until next time, friend.
Yes,
Bye.
ma'am. Have a great day.